Hello and welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today we will be discussing the grand year in the jurisdiction of Washington and British Columbia and Yukon.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Hi, my name is Matthew Appel, and I am one of the hosts here of the Working Tools Podcast, along with Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth. We're down in Washington, and we have also with us Right Worshipful Brother Trevor McKeown and Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung, who are members of the Grand Lodge of British Columbia and Yukon. And we are extremely honored this evening to have with us Most Worshipful Brother Don Mackenzie, who is the Grand Master of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Ancient Free and Accepted Masons of British Columbia and Yukon, and Most Worshipful Brother Chris Kaufman, the Grand Master of the Most Worshipful Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of Washington. So, Most Worshipful Sirs, thank you very much for being here this evening.
Thank you.
And you've both been on the show before. We just, as the Masonic year draws to an end, I guess it's almost exactly a month to go for you, Most Worshipful Brother Chris. We're figured we do a little wrap up of the year that has been. Given that COVID has thrown everyone a curveball, what has been going on and what's worked and what hasn't, and what we can look forward to in the future. So,
I guess that's something a little bit different too. For Most Worshipful Brother Kaufman is actually going to, have an installation and an annual communication, whereas Most Worshipful Grandmaster Mackenzie is not. He's continuing on, the circumstances being a little different. And that's got to be different for you guys, eh?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Tell us about your years, guys.
Go ahead, Don.
Okay, well, this year has been, in a nutshell, total and utter chaos. But other than that, it's been a good year. Really, we've got quite a few things accomplished. I think we've carried on keeping our craft engaged. I think I mentioned it the last time I was on here. It's like having a brand new car with a GPS in it. You turn the corner and you find out the bridge is out, but it's not the current GPS, right? And that's exactly what we found this year. And it's been challenging. Sometimes all you have to do is have a good laugh. And luckily I've got some good Grand Line officers with me that we can just laugh at what's happened a lot of times. And yeah. That's good enough for me right now. Chris, you go ahead for a minute.
It's been, we both, Don and I, had lots of plans for the year and none of them happened. We planned on visiting each other's lodges. We had all kinds of plans, but Masonry survived. We learned to do some things that we don't normally do, like something new. Masonry doesn't pick up on new things very easily. And we started using Zoom and other platforms to communicate, to educate. We couldn't do our meetings, but just recently we're allowed to. But most of the jurisdiction picked those things up. Regrettably, there were a few that didn't. And hopefully they will pick those things up as we go in the future. I kind of compare it to the late 1800s when automobiles first started, and I bet the Masons, none of them liked it because they liked their horses. But we learned to drive, and we now use them. Same thing with the phone. We didn't like it because we didn't see the person, but now we use the phone all the time. So hopefully this technology will become more ingrained, and we'll be able to actually, I think about it with my son and his kids and my daughter and her kids. They live on these phones, and if they don't communicate that way, we're not going to get them to participate and join our fraternity. So I think it's a learning opportunity.
Yeah, that's one thing we've fully embraced is the technology. And our technology committee, which Stephen is a member, has done a yeoman's job in helping us out. We started out in the first part of the year and there was no meetings being held. And we had a round table amongst ourselves. How are we going to get this done? We got to get them. So it was some lodges having some meetings, and we just show up at a meeting. And I'll tell you, you show up at the tip of Vancouver Island, you got all the Grand Line there, kind of. And we just answer questions. And I think that was maybe out of the norm from them. They maybe had not seen a Grand Master in their lodge for 15, 20 years, perhaps. It's hard to say. And I think it went over really well. And so we expanded upon that. And just once the Zoom meeting started to happen, we dedicated our evenings to Zoom. So we went on many, many Zoom meetings. Even at this point here now, I'm still doing probably 15 meetings a week at least.
Wow.
So, and we've kept that pace up going right from September when we had to shut it down when the cases started to jump here. So we figure we're doing a little bit of damage control, and we found that a lot of the lodges were interpreting what the health regulations were for what they wanted to hear. And I'm sure Chris is very well aware of this. We had in British Columbia, the health officer came out and said you can meet with 10 people. But she pulled those words back the next day and said it's 10 people in your own bubble, which means mother and the father and their 8 children. If not, there's no 10 people meeting. So we had lodges saying, well, why can't we have a meeting with 10 people now? And you have to go through the whole, But anyway, it's been challenging, but yet rewarding. We've had one of the first things we did is we encouraged the district deputies to have their official visit, virtual official visit in their district. And that started in December, I think it was. And it went over really well. And we carried on doing the Grand Master's virtual official visits. We've had, a couple hundred on the meeting. As a matter of fact, the one meeting that Chris came to, we had, I think, 7 Grand Masters from all the way from California, Oregon, Washington, Alaska, British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. So there was 7 Grand Masters there, and that was, other than being a long meeting, Chris, it was a pretty unusual meeting. Yeah. And at the end, every jurisdiction stood up and said what they've been doing, and it was great. It was a nice meeting.
Yeah, the other thing that we've done here is because we couldn't meet and couldn't go out, I love dropping in on lodges and wasn't able to do that. We started doing Grand Masters forums, and I think we did 6 of them. The first one, we didn't realize our license was only for 100 people. Some people couldn't get in, so we bought the bigger license. But we've had 120, 150 people attend each one of those. And it's been very interesting because, you get the people. Sometimes it was frustrating because 3 different people would ask the same question because they didn't like the answer they got, apparently. But you had to just keep going along. But
I will say, from the angle of the average Mason in the street, or the more interested than average probably Mason in the street, I loved those forums. The ability to just ask a question that, I don't know, somehow when it comes from the authority, from Dad, it's got a little more authority behind it than when you ask somebody else and you're liable to get half an answer or whatever. And yours, and actually the Grand Secretary's forums too, I think are just extremely helpful for getting information out there. And more than once I said to myself that it is shocking how well demeanored and patient you were with some of those questions, because every once in a while I would just be, it was impressive.
You should see the floor below me.
So like I said, I think that was one of the, if you're talking about victories that grew out of COVID, I think that's definitely one of them. That was a big step in the right direction.
Well, interesting thing, to watch the adoption of the technology. Because I do the text messaging program in my district, I can tell you when I first started that a few years ago, you stand up in lodge and ask them how many guys had smartphones, and you maybe had a half a dozen guys put their hands up. And now it's complete 180. and they've got their smartphones, and now they've got tablets, and now they're doing Zoom meetings, and it's been well, like I said, very interesting to watch the adoption, because it's been so fast because of COVID that the pace is unbelievable. I've never seen things adopted in our lodges, in our districts that quick. And I got to say, Most Worshipful Grand Master, I saw the stuff Grand Lodge put out for recommendations. I guess a little preempt to that, or maybe I'll let you speak to it. It's great. I think those who are looking for it, it's exactly what they needed. There's those of us who are meeting in a casual format, and we'll continue that. We're not trying to replace and have meetings and like that, but been a lot of positive feedback about that. Why don't you tell them what you guys are doing with that?
Well, we came up with a I won't say a protocol, but it's an interim way to meet on Zoom, to make it more meaningful to everybody that shows up. Like when we first started, very true, Stephen. There was guys laying on their couch in a white T-shirt and eating potato chips, and you know what I mean. And what we found is the more formal it became, the more acted like a real meeting, and people were better at communicating, because it's the way we usually do it in lodge, where instead of everybody just trying to talk over each other, it turned into a real meeting then. As I was stating, we'd just show up, we'd get the Zoom coordinates for some little lodge way out in the middle of nowhere, and we'd just say, okay guys, we're here, what would you like to talk about? It's much the same thing as your forum, Chris. Just in a little different.
Pretty cool to have the Grand Line just pop into your casual Zoom meeting for your lodge, and you're like, wow, everybody's here, not just one or two, they're all here.
We would laugh about it, and we would have a good time, and it was very informal, and yet it was very formal. You know, was quite an amazing transformation of the meetings that we noticed over a period of about, like you said, it happened very fast, even about six weeks or 2 months. It was a total increase in membership that was coming out, and they were trying to act like a real meeting. So
right. There's another interesting thing, is the volume of activity that you two have had to endure through this. Like you guys have been to more Zoom meetings and more committee meetings and more activity than probably you ever even thought you would have on your schedule for the year, eh?
Go ahead, Chris. You answer.
Yeah, well, yeah. In some ways, yes, and in some ways, no. You know, I mean, I had a very full calendar, and I planned on traveling all over the state, going to lodge meetings here, there, and everywhere, and didn't get to do that. But I spent a whole lot more time at the Grand Lodge office working with the Grand Secretary and figuring out what edict's going out this week versus, because they changed the rules on us, or what we're doing next week. And I spent a whole lot more time doing that than I ever planned on doing. So, I mean, it was a variety. It's so nice. We just started meeting again May 1st in person. And I was at 4 lodge meetings last week in person. I'm going to be in 4 this week. Now I was in 4 the week before that. And it's just so good to go out and be there. Yeah. But as to our schedule, I don't know. It's busy, and it has been, but I'm not sure it's any busier or less busy than it would have been otherwise.
Just in a different form, isn't it?
Yeah.
Chris? Just in a different form, like a lot more. I spent a lot more time phoning Chris and the Grand Master of Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. What are you guys doing? You know, like what are you finding your problems are? And believe it or not, a lot of us had the same problems. It's just how you handled it, right? And that's when I said it's very important to have a good laugh once in a while. Yes, it's very important to have a good laugh.
You know what impressed me is when you talk about those little lodges and then in the north, or in the little lodges in the tip of Vancouver, wherever, and no offense, Grandmaster Chris, but Washington didn't seem to embrace that as well as we could have. So some of our remote lodges didn't meet, or even some of our not so remote. I mean, even some of our downtown lodges or that did have access, just it seemed like some things stopped. And so I was always impressed, especially when I hear about those things happening and your whole Grand Line, especially being able to drop in on a little remote lodge that is actually meeting on Zoom and talking about the idea that Zoom and this kind of technology has become ubiquitous. I mean, we were just a year and a half ago, we would have to have special sessions for our show. We'd have to have a special session with the guest a week before to make sure that their video worked and their audio worked and all that. And what's Zoom? How does that work? And we have to download some software. And then now we can give you the number or give you the link and everybody knows how to use it. So I think as Steve mentioned, the embrace of technology, and then also you and Chris and the future Grand Lines as well, it'll behoove them to continue that technology use. And I mean, gosh, for example, our Temple board is going to continue to meet virtually. There's no reason for us to get, everybody get in their car and drive down to an hour for a half-hour meeting.
I think I don't think Zoom is going to go away, and I think we should embrace it for certain things. Nothing takes the place. We're designed to meet in person and have handshakes and hugs and everything else, and we don't want to change that. But for some of the brethren that perhaps can't drive at night, can't climb the stairs up into the upstairs of the lodge building, I think it would behoove us to try to figure out something even for festive board down below to keep them engaged. If they're paying dues, we should do something for them. At least they could come in and attend a board of general purpose of the lodge, right? And we've done our board of general purpose online for the last three or four online. We didn't have too many boards of general purpose this year, just for that very reason. And because everything's kind of was in flux, if you know what I mean. So.
And do you get a good number out for those BOGPs? Yes, we did. Yeah.
Grandmaster Chris, one of the ideas from Canada I would love to steal is the Board of General Purposes.
Okay, I was just going to ask Don, what is that? Because I'm not familiar with the term.
Well, it's when you get your 11 standing committees and your 14 either other committees, whether it be board of trustees or whatever together, and everybody has they're supposed to give a report to Grand Lodge and to everyone, of course, and you can ask how things are going in that regard. What we're hoping to do this time here is perhaps strengthen the mandates that the different committees have. Like this year here, because we're going to be serving another term, I think it would behoove us to do something for the next Grand Lines that follow us, so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel if it ever happens again. It's not if this is going to happen; it's when it's going to happen again, right? And
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think what he's referring to is our on a more lodge level, right? A board of general purpose. We get together. The whole lodge is invited, the entire membership, and that's where we sit down and talk about the bills and talk about the plans for things happening, and that's where most of the actual work gets done or talked about, and things kind of get recommended from the board of general purpose to the lodge that we do this, we do that. And it gets recommended that we do these things. But all that is hashed out in a meeting that is separate from our regular lodge meetings, so that all that back and forth getting business done stuff is not clogging up a business a night where we can get together for good fellowship and education.
Okay. Understood.
The Grand Lodge Board of General Purposes in British Columbia and Yukon started about 35 years ago. It was an advisory group to the Grand Master made up of his principal officers. So I think there was 5 or 6 of them, and that was all that they met once or twice a year. Then they started meeting more often. And then at some point, someone decided that they should be including the standing committees, finance, jurisprudence. And in our jurisdiction, we tried an experiment for almost a decade where we had elected regional representatives, which we discovered didn't work for a number of reasons we don't need to go into here. But then the next evolution about 2 or 3 years ago, was to include the district deputy grand masters. But still constitutionally, it's strictly an advisory board to the grand master. It has no authority, but it's generally where committees will bounce ideas and say, this is what we're going to bring up at Grand Lodge, or this is what we'd like to do. So that's a bit of a history of all that.
Yeah, okay. That's very interesting and something we might want to consider. I mean, we sort of do some of that now with our long-range planning committee. We're supposed to have all the committees show up there, but frequently they don't. We do have the XCOM, which is all our electeds, and we meet every month, or more frequently than that, actually, this year. But yeah, very similar. And if I can go back a little bit, what Don was talking about, using Zoom basically as a tool. And I've said this many times. If you're going to put a tack on the wall, you don't use a sledgehammer, you use a tack hammer. So you got to use the tool for what it's good for, it doesn't solve all the problems of the world. So I agree. Meeting together on the level, that hug, that handshake, is fabulous, and one of the main reasons I joined Masonry. But education and some of these other things we can do on Zoom, they're great. And the opportunities with, I attended Zoom meetings put on by the Grand Lodge of New York, and other places that otherwise I never would have gone to. And it's been very interesting.
That's actually another one of the silver linings that I would say, from my perspective, is coming out of COVID is we have in our lodge Zoom meetings, we have a brother who moved to Wisconsin, one who moved to the Philippines, another one who's in Arizona who would show up on a regular basis now to these. And, we get to see him and that sort of stuff. We have another guy in Sweden, and I haven't gotten him to come yet, but he's, it's my next goal. But he's, just being able to see these guys that we haven't seen in years is really helpful. All they do now is, they get a card in the mail or something. Now we actually get to talk to them.
I would hazard a guess. I've met a tremendous amount of people this year on some of these Zoom meetings. For instance, we have the 9 o'clock toast here that's been going on for about 500 and some odd days at this point, every night, right? And some of those people are from North Carolina, South Carolina, Boston, whatever. And I've become pretty good friends with some of those and some of the people. And it's also brought to light a bunch of problems that we saw that we were having. For instance, I had one gentleman, he was 90 or 91 years old. And he says, Grandmaster, he says, I've moved down onto Vancouver Island now, but he says, I've had a 60-year jewel sitting up at a lodge up in the Okanagan. And I says, well, it'd be my honor if you could get that jewel. If you want me to get it down here, I'll get it down here. And the very first chance we get, I'll present you with I'd be honored to present you with your 60-year jewel. And he thought that was just absolutely fantastic. So we started doing jewels. And then at one meeting, I think I gave out 550 or 575 years of long service jewels.
Wow.
Yeah. And it just turned into, so consequently, I make a trip once a week into the Grand Line office, and Al McLeod wants me to sign another stack of certificates. But other than that, it's been really good. The technology has probably saved us this year, to tell you the truth.
And Chris, you mentioned the education component.
Yeah.
It's been an incredible tool for that. The meetings, the education meetings I've been able to attend around the world, just incredible opportunities that otherwise we would not have had, right?
That's absolutely true. We've done all kinds of, we've taken our lodge leadership retreat and put some of those classes out on Zoom as well.
Yes. Yeah, we've been on some meetings. I've attended meetings in Scotland and all over the place, just like Chris has. But it's been very interesting some of those lodges over there in Scotland and England that I attended had heard about British Columbia going out and traveling around to their lodges on Zoom. And the one meeting I was able to meet with the Grand Master of Scotland on there. It was great. And but I went back a month later and they said, well, nobody from the Grand Line's been here since that last meeting that you were on. But it's I think we saw we had a problem and we endeavored to repair the problem, and I think it really helped with the S&M too. You know, if you know what I mean, Chris. I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
Just showing that maybe we put our pants on the same way as everybody else does too.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly.
So what are we looking forward? So just by way of background, we just started meeting, as someone said earlier, on May 1st. Lodges are authorized to meet again here in Washington. And I know we're looking forward to, as I said earlier, in almost exactly a month, the Grand Lodge of Annual Communication for Washington. Chris, do you have Most Worshipful Sir, do you have a preview of how that's going to go? What are sort of the details of that?
Well, our annual communication, normally we do it for 2 days, and we actually get there on Thursday. We do a bunch of stuff Thursday night, Friday and Saturday, but we crammed it down a little bit because we can only have about 200 people there. The governor just changed rules again and go up to 50%, but with the 6-foot separation, that's still required. We can get up to maybe 220, I think is what the hotel will allow us. So with 158 lodges, there's only one representative from each lodge. That's all we could do. I couldn't allow two. It just wouldn't work. So we're going to do that. We're going to have a fun dinner on Friday night. 60s theme, by the way, and nobody's going to recognize me when I come in because my hair will be much, much longer. But that's okay. And then we start bright and early Saturday morning, 9 o'clock. We have all the resolutions that we didn't do last year, plus 3 more new ones this year. All should be slam dunks because they're my recommendations, so they should go through with no problem.
Famous last words.
Yeah, I know that. I say that sarcastically. But we've had to change some of the rules too. Normally we allow 3 speakers on each resolution, and 4 and against, and 3 minutes for each of them. This year we can only allow 2 minutes and 3 of them, and they have to be at the mic at the time I call on it. If they're not there, they lose it. Our timing is so tight this year that I have 15 minutes to spare between the time we open at 9 o'clock that we have to close by 4:30. I only got 15 minutes to play with. So
Clint doesn't think that's gonna work, but
well, I know he doesn't, but I know. But then again, we've been going through all this paperwork too. We hope to get through it all, but it's going to be an interesting day. We're going to have a public installation of the new officers at 7:30 on Saturday night. We're going to initiate our Grand Master into the Grand Masters Association of Washington at 6 o'clock. Sorry, 4 of you can't come, but it's going to be an interesting experience. Yes, and then I'm taking the year off. I'm going back to the old way it was, where Grandmaster got done. He takes a year off, doesn't take any appointments, and lays low because the new Grandmaster is now Grandmaster. You don't want people coming up to you. Well, what you think they should be doing or whatever. No, I'm just going to lay low, just attend my own lodges. I've got some projects around the house I'm going to take care of. So it's going to be very different because I won't have Clint calling me at 9:15 in the morning, which he does almost every morning to make sure I'm up. But now Don's year is going to be a whole lot different.
Yeah, speaking of Don, maybe we can use this as our opportunity to segue into a second episode with you guys. Are you guys good to stick around for another episode here?
I'm fine with it.
Fine, yeah.
because I think that's going to be a little longer conversation than we have left here. So that being said, I'll just take the opportunity on behalf of the Working Tools podcast to thank you guys for being here to do this episode with us, and I look forward to our next one.